All right, great. So first off, basic information about yourself. Where are you from? Where were you born? How old are you? Things like that.
Yeah, so I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and grew up here. Was born and raised, and really grew up just 5 minutes from where I live now in my apartment. So yeah, I grew up a race fan in Charlotte, and watched a lot of racing from afar. Was never really in a racing family, but always was passionate about the going to the races and things of that nature. So yeah, and it's kind of grown from there, and try to spend most of my time in North Carolina for sure.
So now then, what was it exactly? How did you first get into actually racing? Because you did not start racing out, as far as I understand, in real life. You started racing out actually in sim racing, I believe, from my understanding. So how did you get involved with that?
Yeah, I started in sim racing when I was 13 years old, around there, and really what led me to do that was watching some of the guys like Dale Jr. and Landon Castle, and there were a few various drivers that were using sim racing as kind of a platform to improve their skills and perform better on the track. So I thought that was really awesome and intriguing for me to kind of to learn about the sport, and see how I could maybe further my knowledge about the sport through sim racing. And really, what that honestly did was it made me realize that I could drive pretty well. So, I think as soon as I realized that I was pretty good at driving on there, that led into hoping and looking for an opportunity in a real race car.
So when you first got into real life racing, iRacing was still, I guess, I mean, it had been around for a little while, but it was still a relatively new thing when you got into racing in real life. So did you ever experience any maybe like backlash from people that had been in the sport for a while when when you first started getting into racing in real life?
Oh, for sure. A lot of people were skeptical of my ability to, run a real race car based on my background. They were worried about whether I really knew how to race each other, other cars around the track, and the etiquette and kind of all of those things. So it definitely was a drawback for some, and definitely a kind of a hard stereotype to overcome. But I think a lot of people, as soon as they saw me start to win races and really do well, I think that kind of went away and became more about the results that I produced on track.
So when it comes to sim racing, of course, people always rave about how accurately they're able to recreate the tracks and stuff like
Yeah.
that in sim racing. Now that's obviously really great, but one thing I'm sure a lot of people have been curious about is, are there any maybe some limitations with sim racing, some things that it probably doesn't simulate as well because it's not virtual reality, it's a simulation.
Yeah, it is a simulation for sure. I think the biggest things that it doesn't simulate is the fear factor of driving a car and the danger aspect that you have to go through to and risks that you have to take and to make the moves that it takes to win. And when you're on a computer racing, and you make those moves, the risk and the impact is much less. When you're in a race car and you make a move that takes a lot of skill and aggressive nature, it's definitely much more of an impact if it goes wrong. So I think that those things stick with you over time, and it's hard to overcome the fact that you learn from experience, and you kind of when you're on a sim, you don't necessarily learn that as much because you can take that risk and not face a lot of repercussions for it. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned. And I think there's also the aspect of working with a team and being in a environment that it takes to it's a tough environment when you have to work with a bunch of people on your race team, and it takes a lot of skill to get the best out of everyone around you. So those skills are all important. I guess that's the difference in sim racing to the real racing.
So as your career began to develop, how did you end up getting in touch with Rick Hendrick at first? Because I know
Yeah.
you raced for Kyle Busch in the Truck Series, and then you started racing for Hendrick in the Xfinity Series. I believe it was 2016 or 17, if I remember right. So how did you end up getting to know Rick Hendrick at first?
Yeah, so I grew up racing legend cars and in Charlotte, and I was a big Hendrick Motorsports fan. Went to the race shop a few times over the course of a few years, and really was a huge 48 fan, huge 24, all the different cars. Really, I was a big fan of all the different drivers. So I think as soon as as soon as I started to race for real, I really wanted to kind of emulate the Hendrick look, some of the numbers that they had, the 25 car, some of the various things that they incorporated into their race cars that I thought looked cool. And then I raced for Dale Jr.'s team in the late model series. And as soon as I started racing late models for Dale Jr., Mr. Hendrick had a connection to that team because he was a part owner in it, or still is. So his part ownership in Junior Motorsports really was what propelled me towards that place. And I met him for the first time at a luncheon that they had at the beginning of the season to kind of get excited for the season for their Xfinity team. And through that luncheon and just talking to him, I made it known to him that I really hopefully wanted to drive for him one day. And I think that honestly planted the seed. And then further down the road, after I'd won quite a few races in the Xfinity or in the truck series, I ended up getting a phone call from Mr. Hendrick, and he wanted to talk about possibly working with me for a long-term future. So it just kind of, I planted that seed early on and was really fortunate that he followed up on it and gave me that call, and that kind of changed everything.
Now, what was it like when Rick Hendrick called you up and told you that you're not only going to be driving for him in the Cup Series, but you're going to be driving the iconic number 24 that had been made so famous? Of course, I know I grew up a big Jeff Gordon fan, so that number's obviously very iconic. What was that like when you found out you're going to be driving that car? Not only that, you got to win in that car earlier this year at Daytona.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy experience to have him tell me that he was going to first move me up into the Cup Series, which was a shock and a surprise in itself. But secondly, the fact that I was going to run the 24 car. And I think that was a big, task and a huge undertaking for me, and something that, was a lot of pressure for sure. And I think that it was exciting, and it really, over a span of a couple of months, really everything changed in my life, from going to racing Xfinity, where your life is more simple. You race on Saturdays, you have Sundays off, you don't have as many days at the track, and the races are not near as long, to racing on Sundays, where the races are 4.5 hours long, and you have a lot of requirements and things that you have to do, to get to the racetrack and to perform well. So it was a much different environment. It was a lot of excitement, but also nerves of hoping that it goes well.
Now, what would you say was the biggest? Yeah, because of course the transition from Xfinity to Cup. I mean, a lot of people, it takes them a long time to get adjusted to Cup racing when they first get into it. What was the biggest adjustment for you going from trucks and Xfinity to going to Cup in 2018?
Well, I think honestly, you underestimate all the details that Cup racing, entails. I think you underestimate the competition, the skill level, the amount of detail that each team really takes to the racetrack, even the teams that perform, maybe in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack. So it was amazing to me just to see the quality of people that the Cup Series has, the quality of cars, sponsors, everything that makes up the series to be what it is. So I think that was really a shock, and I think that you're really just trying to figure out the little details that it takes to do well, and that just takes time. It takes effort and time to figure those things out. So that was probably the biggest adjustment, and the fact that you're not always going to be up at the front of the field and contending for wins. Typically you're going to have opportunities like that, but they're few and far between, and they're not as regular basis. So it's harder to perform under pressure, because you don't always have a chance to do it over and do it better.
One more racing question here before I transition to your education. So Martinsville's coming up in a couple of weeks, and I just want to ask, what is racing at that track like? Because obviously the proximity there to Liberty, it's very close, only an hour and a half away. And not only that, with the history the 24 car has had there, Jeff Gordon won there 9 times. What's going to Martinsville like for you?
Yeah, it's a blast. I love Martinsville. It gets me excited every year. It was the first track that I went to as a kid and watched a race on. And I think there's even more ties now. Not only that, but having Liberty be really close by and having a lot of fans to that encourage us and cheer for us at a Virginia racetrack is really a cool thing. So I always enjoy that. I think that honestly, I've enjoyed the track a lot more recently because we've run better. We've run in the top 10 the last 2 times and really had a really fast car. So I think I enjoy it because of that more than ever now. So it's been a lot of fun lately, and hopefully we can do better than our second place finish there last fall.
You actually helped me get into Martinsville last year because Liberty actually gave out tickets to students for $24.
Yeah,
So I bought a ticket. My dad made the 12-hour drive from Indiana, and we both got to go to the race. So thanks for
that's
that.
awesome.
That was
That's awesome.
awesome. Great. Yeah, I've been to that track twice, and I'm hoping to go there again in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. So now it's transitioning a bit more towards your education. Now, of course, a lot of race car drivers, they don't have college degrees. So why
Mhm.
for you was it so important to get a college degree at this point in your life?
Yeah, I think just to be well rounded, I think that to be diverse and to be able to multitask is, I think, an important role, an important dynamic of any person that's trying to succeed in something. So I feel like being educated on a various amount of topics and being able to navigate the waters of the world and really understand, for me, it's business management. So, understanding economics, understanding what my finances look like and how I can manage those, and how I can maybe not necessarily manage it myself, but how I know the right directions to go and the right things to do, in my life. So I think those are important. And I feel like if you don't have an education, you're kind of you're putting all your eggs in one basket of just being good at one thing. And I think it's great to be a great race car driver, but you also have to understand the various aspects of life that you're gonna deal with over time to try to be successful, I guess.
So what have you thought about doing with that business management major after you leave Liberty? Do you plan on maybe starting your own team or just starting like maybe like a business of some sort or anything like that once you get that degree?
Yeah, it's honestly pretty far out for me. I think that, for me, I've envisioned myself being a driver for a while, and I
Hmm.
really haven't thought about anything after that. But I do think that it'll be nice to apply it to some of the various things that I do financially and some of the decisions that I make. So, yeah, I think that it always comes into play with anything, big or small, scale wise, and hopefully after I drive, I can find something else that is a passion for me that really leads me down a path of doing something that I really love.
Now, why did you end up choosing to go to school online at Liberty when you made the decision to continue your education?
Yeah, I think honestly for me, because I was starting to race, nationwide, and this was back in high school, I was starting to race in the truck series, and so I was traveling a lot, and there wasn't really the option of going to a normal, 5 days a week, be in a classroom setting. So Liberty University Online was really kind of the avenue for me because I was able to take my work with me and go to the racetrack and do things maybe in my hotel room while I had some time off from the racing. So yeah, I think it just made sense for me because I could do it anywhere. It was very mobile, and I didn't have to be in one place all the time, which was kind of it's just kind of the way that my life is structured with as much as we travel to different racetracks.
And then how did your relationship with Liberty transition to it just being your school to actually becoming your sponsor? And
Mhm.
it's real. I mean, Liberty's been a huge part of
Yeah.
funding your racing career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, what made that transition was when I was in high school and I was, doing online classes along with my high school classes. I started to become interested in explaining that more to people and really telling people about that as I was at the racetrack, and I was getting a lot of questions about it, and it just made sense to really kind of broadcast that to people and be open about it. And I think that the other thing is that the way that my racing career started, which was online racing, very similar to getting my online degree. So, the steps that I took to learn and then go out and apply that into the real world was really similar to what I've been doing on online school.
That's awesome to hear, man. That's a that's a pretty cool story right there. Well, William, thank you very, very much for your time. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And we keep absolutely good luck for the rest of the season for you. And hopefully I'll be watching you at Martinsville in a couple weeks.
yeah, absolutely. I hope you can be there. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and hopefully, I don't know if they have fans guaranteed for that race, but hopefully they do. So I'm
Hey,
looking forward to it.
hey, I bought a ticket. Worst case scenario is they email me and they say, "Hey,
That's
look,
right.
you can't come and refund me." So
That's all right.
we'll see
That's
what
good.
happens.
That's good, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for catching up.
All right, you're welcome. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good day. See ya.